A family that slays together, stays together. Here's your relook at the NECA toys. This is the Seed of Chucky family box set. Yes, astute viewers will know that I've already had a look at this set a couple of times already, but with the recent release, somewhat recent release of the NECA Toys Bride of Chucky set, I thought it would be fitting to go back and have a look at the set that only included Glen, and a figure that was never available since. I'm going to go ahead and measure off each one of these figures to say that these figures have lasted the test of time. Well, I wouldn't be able to say that. Unfortunately, there has been a lot of problems with this particular set. I'll talk about that in a second. Measuring each of the figures, however, the original Chucky from Seed of Chucky stands 5.4 inches in height. And working that out to be centimeters, you're looking at 13.7 centimeters tall. Switching that back over to inches, we're going to go off and measure off Glen. And one of the main reasons, in all honesty, why we're looking at this set yet again is because we still have yet to get ourselves another re-release of Glen. Will it ever happen? Who's to say? In the meantime, though, Glen, I suppose now the exclusive to the set, even though technically all the figures are exclusives to this set, Glen stands 4.9 inches in height, which works out in centimeters. Whoa, where are we going here? Centimeters? There we go. I got ahead of myself. 12 and a half centimeters tall for Glen. And last but certainly not least, Tiffany, his lovely bride. I was trying to find a nice way to say that. We're going to go ahead off and measure off Tiffany to the very top of her head. She is standing at 5.5 inches in height, which once again in centimeters, 13.9, almost 14 centimeters tall. I have had this set in my collection for many years. In fact, you probably will know from some of the earliest times that I've looked at this on this channel for how long I've had it. Still remember the time I actually went to a local convention and I saw these from the far distance and immediately beelined it, or it might have been eye-lined it over right to the booth. And whatever the price the gentleman was selling it for, it might have even been like, I want to say $60 or so. I immediately grabbed it because here in Canada, we just weren't able to get access to figures like these in local stores. Often at times for many of the NECA toy box sets at least, and you had to go to either specialty stores or I had to look online. Needless to say, many, many years later, here are the accessories that would have come included with the set. And I think these are all the accessories as I've had these bagged up. I don't have the original box anymore. Sadly, that's kind of one thing I wish I could have kept, as it may have also aided to keep these guys intact. They're quite a mess. Anyways, does come included with the axe. I do notice, though, that there's still an adhesive glue stickiness to these. These are probably from the original tape when I took them off and I took these out of the clamshells. It does come with the axe, a red handled axe with some silver painted on the end. I would not necessarily say that these are crude. I mean, to the credit, back in the day, they've even put like little pivot points, little scratches and stuff like that in the actual head of the axe. It's not just simply a smooth axe. So back in the day, even like NECA was adding little small tiny details like that to their accessories. You get yourself two variations of the knife. I got all these hairs all over this knife, which I think is culprit-wise. I think it's because, again, I still have, you can probably see it right there, the adhesive glue. It's part of a time capsule. Look, I still got the little glue from the initial time that I took it out of the packaging. Also comes with the more serrated knife as two knives of choice. You can display these. Well, you can display them somewhat. Chucky really supports better the larger knife here. And then Tiffany does better to hold the smaller knife, just because of the way that her hands are. Glen holds nothing. Well, I guess you can kind of balance it in his hands. We'll talk about that in a second. Included also with this set was the Eye of Damballa, something introduced later into the franchise of the Chucky films. The Eye of Damballa is a nice little representation. To be credited, at least, it actually has a metal chain, something which you could I don't know if you would drape it over top of Chucky's head. You could probably have to double that up just so it doesn't drape as as far down as it does. And there, the scripture on the back there. And just again, really nice little representation of the Eye of Damballa. And last but certainly not least, slightly a little bit more cruder, the set comes also with a turkey baster, with something on the end of the turkey baster. Again, done in translucent plastic, a nice representation of the turkey baster, with or without the end trails there, sticking out from the end there, but a nice representation of the turkey baster that we got from the film. I'm going to do some comparisons. I won't unfortunately be able to do comparisons with a Glen because, well, we still have yet to get a Glen, and I don't even know if NECA would even consider giving us a Glen. I guess they could have really done the Bride of Chucky set, ideally as a Seed of Chucky set, and included a Glen also in there, but for all the other things that they gave us for that set, it would also make for a much bigger, much more costlier expense on their part, and then also for us to pick up the set for ourselves. So having a look at the individual figures, we'll first have a look at Chucky. And for some fun, I took the time and the liberty to go into my collection, and I brought out quite the size comparison, actually. The Bride of Chucky, which is as close proximity as we can get so far to this Chucky here, the one on the right. You'll see, obviously, size comparisons-wise, this set was really intended, I think, to be displayed all on its own. Scaling this one out to, say, the likes of a Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees would just be absolutely ridiculous because the height of Chucky would be way, way too tall. Looking at the two side by side, there are actually benefits to the original, and still the reasonings why I keep the original part of my collection. There's something to the charm, I think, for not only the fact that the paint, I think, is a little richer, honestly, on the original release, this one right here, and also for the fact that it still has doll hair, which NECA Toys abandoned in the hopes of just kind of controlling the sculpt, went the route instead of giving us plastic rooted hair. Honestly, I kind of still dig the rooted doll hair. I think most definitely it works better for Tiffany, but really all of the figures I think still look great, and I think a lot of it can be contributed to the fact that they have rooted hair. It is really different to look at them side by side. I tried to get a head sculpt that was close enough, because this one does have several different head sculpts, but I tried to get one that was close enough proximity so you could see the difference between the two. The stitching, for example, and just the swelling, I guess, around where the patches of his flesh would have been sewn together, I think works still better, honestly, on the original. And they're just, again, something charming, I think, for the fact that this is, like I said, rooted doll hair. And it just feels like it's got coloring a little bit more akin to what we saw in the film. Now, again, it doesn't have, it's not been problem-free. The years in which I've owned this set has been plagued with one disappointment after the next. The one that started, I guess, was the fact that the arm broke off the socket. This was a common thing back in the day because NECA Toys were using clear peg systems. And clear plastic really was one of the worst things you could use for something that would be moving like a joint. The moment that started drying, that plastic, and the moment you jerked and moved the arm too quickly, that limb would break right off. I tried to be extremely delicate with the handling of all the other figures' arms, but it just seemed time after time, every single time that I moved the arms, a new arm would break off on the new figure, or the next figure in line. Now, the thing about this, though, is that I have still refused the idea of gluing these in place. And the reason why I don't glue these in place is there's something rather charming and magical about the fact that these joints, the way they break, still allows you in some regards to be able to move the arm and pop it back in the socket. Now, there's really nothing holding this arm currently. I mean, this arm still is broken. I haven't fixed it with dark magic, but there's something actually for the fact that if you keep the joint not glued, you can still move the arm, some to a lesser extent, but you can still move the arm in a way that will allow the arm to stay in place. And all the more reasoning why I never glued the arm. This arm still, knock on wood, is not broken. I don't know how long that's going to last, mind you. I think it's one of the few arms on this set that still has held out. That probably will likely break, so just for the time being, I'm not going to get too, moving around to the joint too much, because again, I just don't want to gamble the fact that that's going to break on me. So really, for anybody that has had this problem happen for themselves, I would honestly say, don't entertain the idea of gluing this. The other thing you could also do too is take like a little bit of like Mac tack, the little kind of ball of Play-Doh, and just kind of stick it in the socket. That might be enough to help hold it in place. Gluing it though would permanently keep it the way it is, and I'm not down for the idea of permanently keeping that arm in a way that I can't move it whatsoever. I wish I could say the same, sadly, for the head. The head broke right off. It broke right off to the point where I did have to use glue. The simple fix of just having the head sitting on the socket wasn't enough, because there wasn't anything holding the head in place, and it would roll off, roll down the table, and roll across the street. So I ended up having to glue it in place. So that's unfortunately one sacrifice I've had to make in favor of keeping the original set that I had. A lot of the cult classics and even like sets like this have become extremely expensive in the aftermarket, and I really don't want to have to source out getting another set at an inflated price, probably around $150 to $200, when I already have this set, and as long as I don't move anything on it, I should still be perfectly fine. So again, I really do like the head portrait. Nothing to this guy feels necessarily aged. He's not as bad, say, for like in comparison to like some of the older cult classic figures, which suffer some dated feel to them when you look at them nowadays. Like the tear that they've also done in his coveralls all the way down. You still got all the good guy prints and his little tiny feet down below, complete with the good guy's soul underneath. The thing about this though is, still to this day when I look at these figures, and you'll excuse me that I don't do the articulation on some of these. Basically what it is, let me just grab it here for example. He would have had ball joint on the head. Can't really do that now. He would have had a pin joint on the arm. I can do that to some extent now. And he would have also had a hinge and a rotation in the arm. It's weird just to be taking off the arm like this for Chucky. I can't imagine he'd be all that happy with it. And then the rest of the body is pretty much staction. The thing about it though, and even back then, I'm sure when I first initially did the review of it, cringing for the fact I would have to go back and watch some of my older stuff. I think a lot of people just have a tough time going back and watching their older stuff. I still feel back then, and still to this day, that their arms are way too long. Their arms are very, very long. And if you compare it to like the ultimate Chucky from the Bride of Chucky, like the arm still felt long, but it seemed naturally long. There's something monkey-like about these long, these long draping arms that are on these figures that just seem too creepily long. And I know I'm just creating words there. So I know this one does have more superior articulation, but really all things considered, there's still this charm that I have for the set, and one reason why I would never want to really get rid of it. Looking at also Tiffany, we can just grab her and be careful, of course, nothing else breaks on her. Luckily, she still has what I think is a functional ball joint for the time being, but she does also suffer the same fate. I think it was this arm here. Her joint also broke off. Snapped clearly right off. This clean, broke right off. Disappointing. Her socket seems to hold the arm a little bit better though. I think this arm is still okay, but I'm not going to force that too much. We can do a comparison again with the smaller counterpart, the newer release of Tiffany. And you know what? I still feel like looking at this one and looking at the original one, I kind of still like the original, honestly speaking. I think the coloring is a little bit more vibrant. I like the expression better on this one's face, this one here versus this one here. I think she just looks a little bit more like the movie. Certainly also could be said for the fact that she's got the rooted doll hair. That is leaps and bounds better than the plastic hair that we ended up going with the Tiffany. It almost seems like they kind of go a little bit more cartoony with at least this rendition of Chucky and Tiffany. Whereas I feel like the first one, the initial one, the better one, I feel, still looks like it's a little bit more rooted, if you pardon the pun there, in more the film realism of the way that they looked in the actual movie. Especially right down to the fact that she does have the rooted hair, which, as much as I like Chucky, I think the bride, I think Tiffany's hair just looks fantastic and still looks like just as good as it did back then when I picked this up. Like, if I was to look at this set now, short of dropping the arm off of her, I'll have to go grab that. Still looking at this set now, I would feel like it hasn't aged one bit. Tiffany, I think, is the superior figure to Chucky. Chucky still has a little bit of rust to him, but I think Tiffany still works exceptionally well, still to this day. Compared to really the fact that we got that other Tiffany, I think this one is the better looking of the two. One thing, good or bad, that you could say that the new figure had was that she did have her lower part of her dress actually as real fabric. This Tiffany ended up resorting to all plastic, which I guess has aided her over the years because it allows the figure to stand a lot better, because she's basically just like a bell of plastic. She's just like a dinner bell made of plastic. Her feet, though, if you look at the undersoles, I don't know what they end up going with here, but I think she looks much better. At least that is one positive thing. I think her boots look a little bit better on the new release than this one right here. I don't think that they quite suit the type of shoes that she actually has in the film. If you look up there, perverts, you can see that she's wearing the fishnet stockings that she also would have had in the film. So again, like, no real complaints necessarily for Tiffany. She's got some really great additional coloring of the blue that's been added also to her dress. Just kind of really makes a lot of things pop, especially the lace on her sleeves. Stands out a little bit more by adding that additional blue. Of the three figures, Tiffany by far is my favorite. Chucky still is no slouch. I like the way Chucky was presented here. Still to this day, it's still a fantastic figure. But my love for this set kind of moves closer here. My eyes wander more so to Tiffany still being the all-star of this wave. Then we get down to Glen, a controversial character, certainly to say the least. Glen was not something that, well, many people received well from Seed of Chucky. It was just a weird, creepy-looking character of Glen. Looking at him, it kind of reminded me of like the early days of David Bowie, how David Bowie looked back in the day. He does have the real rooted hair, although it's a little bit more of like a mullet. It's a darker color, much darker than, of course, Chucky here. And, I mean, he does look like he does in the film, good or bad. I don't personally think he needed to exist in the Chucky universe. And, of course, they've quickly dismissed the idea of Glen even existing, it seems. Like all the subsequent sequels, they make very little to no mention at all. They mention, of course, Tiffany, but they mention nothing about Glen, really. He's got the freckles all over his face. And like I said, that shading around his eyes just really give him like this dark, ghoulish-looking face. His face is a little bit more, I don't want to say his skin tone is a little bit more sicklier, but it's definitely got a more paler complexion than both Tiffany and Chucky have. His outfit consists of a short-sleeved purple shirt, long-sleeved black shirt underneath, and then he's also got black pants and shoes. All of pretty much everything to Glen is staction. He's basically like a clothes peg. You could hang your clothes outside using Glen, if only, of course, his legs could be split apart. Other than really just his arms, his articulation in his shoulders and his head are the only thing that this Glen possesses. He has no articulation in his arms. And speaking of his arms, I think Glen fared the least. He definitely fared the worst when it came to long-term, stability of these characters' joints. His arms broke, and even though, again, I don't think I would ever glue these back into place, because, again, I can still move those arms forward, some to a lesser extent, some a little bit more successful than others, but I can still move the arms out. I would not be able to do that had I glued the arms in place. Glen, again, is a little bit more of a finicky figure. Not only do I have the problem that he's got broken pegs, but also for the fact that because he's got such a narrow, like his legs come together to almost a point, and he's got such small feet and such a large head, he actually is one of the more difficult figures to stand. Just because he has such a small footprint, he kind of teeters back and forth. Just rounding out just the last of wrap-up of this review, as we had already looked at the accessories right here. I just want to kind of show you also some of the comparisons of accessories from this set to the set that we actually got. This is the one on the left, is from the new released Bride of Chucky set. And you can see how there's a big difference between the two. They still have chains, real metal chains, but the actual amulet is much different from one another. Other comparisons we can certainly make is the Turkey Baster. Turkey Baster for the new release versus the older release. Yes, they did definitely omit something. Can't quite put my finger on it. They did omit something, and they also made the Turkey Baster a little bit more of a translucent plastic versus the clear plastic that was from the original release. We can also look at the axes. This was the new axe. This was the old axe. They're about the same size to one another. This one does have a little bit more of a pristine axe head to it. Comparisons also we can look at is Chucky's knife. This is Chucky's knife here from the Bride of Chucky set. A little bit, again, smaller to accommodate smaller figures. And last but certainly not least, the serrated knife. Although this one here is not quite as serrated, but this is the knife from the Bride of Chucky set. This is the knife right here from the Seed of Chucky box set here. So again, like all the accessories, pretty much match one another up in the sense that when NECA Toys decided to re-release these characters to somewhat of a different approach, they did give us pretty much the exact same accessories, just again, a little bit smaller. You know, for what it is, and for the time that I've had this set still in my collection, it's still a set that I hold dear. Primarily, a lot of that could be because of this freak in the middle, for the fact that we've never gotten ourselves a Glen after the fact. But there's still something charming, rather endearing about this particular set versus maybe some of the stuff that we're getting nowadays. NECA is, of course, improving themselves with every new release that they're getting. And every time we get ourselves ultimate box sets, you know we're going to be in a treat for all the different things that they include for it. But this doesn't mean that we should cast a shadow on some of the older figures that we've gotten in the years that NECA have been producing toys. Still, there's enough merits for this one that I still feel it's a better set, all things considered. At least the coloring and stuff I find is a little bit better executed than the one we got with the Bride of Chucky set. This re-review of the NECA Toys Seed of Chucky set also can be contributed to the fact that I got a couple of people on Facebook that had reached out to me and said, you know, NECA Toys had just done the Bride of Chucky set. Would you actually consider going back and redoing the Seed of Chucky family set? After all, we've still not gotten ourselves a Glen. And I was more than happy to oblige. Any opportunity that would allow me to go back into my collection, which unfortunately like, these figures are still relegated to totes, but it does give me a flashback, kind of a nostalgic feel for some of the figures I was collecting back in the day. I've collected NECA for many years now, over a decade, and NECA has always improved their craft, giving us more articulation, better accessories, and better sculpts. But it's not to say again that you should forget these older sets. There's charm and merit to all of them. This one still holds true to my heart because, again, I like the rooted hair myself. I don't know if NECA Toys will ever even really approach the idea of doing rooted hair once again. But again, like I think the coloring on some of these figures, Tiffany most definitely, and even Chucky is no slouch. I think these figures still, for a coloring standpoint, look far better than the stuff that we're getting nowadays. Granted, yes, the stuff that we're getting now, we have more articulation. The figures are scaled a little bit more appropriately to the way that they should be. Chucky shouldn't be as tall or almost as tall as Michael Myers. And so thank goodness the scaling has been corrected for the newer released figures. But again, I still think there's something charming and endearing about these older sets. Let me know down below what you guys think. Did you guys ever pick up the NECA Toys Seed of Chucky family box set? Do you still have it in your collection? And how have they fared? Do you have as many broken things on yours as I do on mine? I always like reading your comments down below and reading about how your collection started with NECA Toys. Were you collecting some of the older sets that we were looking at right here? Or are you kind of getting more into like the Ultimate sets? Was that your entry into the NECA Toys stuff was with the Ultimate figures? Always like reading your comments down below. Again, a big thank you to the few people that commented on Facebook asking if I could go back and re-look at the Seed of Chucky set. I know it had been a while since I looked at this set the last time, so I thought it was fitting enough. Of course, we've changed up the backdrop, changed up the logo a few times here and there over that gap of time, and I thought it was a perfect time to go back and revisit this set once again. If there's anything that I maybe have reviewed in the past that you guys would like to see re-reviews of, feel free to drop a request down down below in the comment section. If I still have the figures, oh, and there go all the figures. Tiffany's just admiring the work in front of her, and it's for the best. If there is, though, anything that you guys have seen me review in previous reviews, and you guys would like to see me re-review it again, by all means, drop a line down below and let me know. If I still have the sets, by all means, more than happy to re-review those figures for you guys. And let's hope those figures have fared a little bit better than the Chucky Seed of Chucky box set, which I think is somewhat ironic that we would be talking about how these figures have held up, only to have these figures fall over in final looks. I'm going to keep this in. I'm going to keep this in the review because I think it's a good representation of how these figures have held up over time. It's just a mess. It's just a mass slaughter of figures. I got arms everywhere. Luckily, Chucky's head is still intact. I think we've lost... No, I think Glen's arms are still intact. It's only Chucky. Chucky's the only one that has suffered from this. He's pretty much suffered in all the films. Why not suffer it here in final looks at the original NECA Toys Seed of Chucky family box set? There you go, guys. That's how we're going to wrap up shop for today. If you are new to this channel or a long-time viewer and just never got around to it, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and swing on over to the bell notification. Pay no attention to the just disintegration of these figures. Maybe the next time they'll be looking at these figures 10 years from now, they'll just be dust. It'll just be like Avengers Infinity War. I'll just have big bags of plastic dust, and I'll do my best to try to represent them as best I can, as I'm literally holding dust in my hands. You never know. 10 years from now, mark it on your calendar. As always, guys, thanks for watching, as you always do, and I'll see you guys next time.